Hi, I'm Silas. I came home early that day, balloons in my hand, cake in the car, ready to surprise my little girl for her birthday. But when I opened the door, the laughter I expected wasn't there. Instead, I found my 7-year-old, my baby, washing dishes through tears, while my wife sat at the table, scrolling her phone, sipping wine. She looked up and said, "If she wants to eat, she'll earn it." In that moment, something inside me broke. I dropped everything and ran to my daughter, because no child deserves to be treated like a servant in her own home. And what happened after that made my wife pay for every single tear she ever caused. I left the shop earlier than usual that evening, the late sun bleeding orange over the neighborhood roofs as I drove home. The passenger seat held a small silver box wrapped in paper my daughter Maeve would have loved. Soft blue ribbon, careful folds. Inside was a music box that played her mother's lullaby. It had taken me 3 weeks to find one that sounded just like the tune I used to hum while holding her tiny hand after the funeral. Tonight, I wanted to see her smile again. The driveway was quiet when I pulled in. Rochelle's car sat there gleaming. I thought she might have decorated the dining room already, maybe set up candles or balloons. Maeve was turning 7, too young to carry the weight she'd been carrying lately, too quiet for a child who used to fill the house with songs. I straightened my jacket, hiding the small gift in the inner pocket, and stepped inside. The first thing I noticed wasn't laughter. It was the faint clinking of dishes, the sound of running water, and a small, muffled sob. I followed it to the kitchen. The glow from the setting sun cut through the blinds, landing across Maeve's small frame. She stood on a stool, sleeves rolled up, scrubbing a pile of plates nearly as tall as her. Her hands were red from the hot water. Bubbles clung to her hair like little ghosts. Rochelle leaned against the counter, a glass of wine in one hand, scrolling through her phone with the other. She didn't even look up. For a moment, I thought I'd walked into the wrong house. My throat tightened. "Maeve," I said softly. She froze, shoulders stiff. Then she turned, eyes wide, cheeks wet. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry. I broke a plate." Her words hit me harder than any shout could. I looked down. Near the trash can, white shards lay in a small pile like someone had swept away her worth. The smell of dish soap mixed with the sweet frosting from an unopened cake box on the counter. The candles were still in their wrapper. The clock above the sink read 6:30. Dinner was supposed to start at 7. Rochelle finally spoke, not even looking up from her phone. "She needs to learn her place, Silas. You spoil her too much." I stared at her, trying to process what I was hearing. "She's 7, I said, my voice low. "Exactly. The sooner she learns, the better." Rochelle took another sip, smirking. "You keep treating her like some little princess, and she'll grow up weak." Maeve's bottom lip quivered. She turned away, scrubbing harder, as if her tiny arms could erase whatever crime she thought she'd committed. I stepped forward, grabbed a towel, and gently took her hands in mine. They were trembling. "Hey," I whispered, drying her fingers one by one. "No more washing tonight, okay?" "But the dishes." "I'll handle it." Her eyes flicked to Rochelle, then back to me, as if she was asking permission to stop. Rochelle sighed, rolling her eyes. I kept my voice calm. "Go to your room, honey. Change into your pajamas. I'll come up soon." She hesitated, then nodded, climbing off the stool. Her footsteps faded down the hall. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, suffocating. I set the towel down and looked at Rochelle. "You think this is discipline?" I asked quietly. "I think you're blind." She set her glass down with a soft clink. "That girl's got too much of her mother in her. Always soft. Always needing to be saved." Something inside me went cold. I reached for the counter to steady myself, but my hand brushed my jacket pocket, and the gift slipped out. The little silver box hit the tile, bounced once, and cracked open. The lullaby stumbled out, thin and broken, the notes warbling before fading into silence. For a moment, neither of us moved. Rochelle tilted her head, her lips curling into something sharp. "You always break the wrong things." The words echoed. I crouched, picking up the cracked music box, its gears clicking faintly in protest. My reflection wavered in the silver lid. Tired eyes, clenched jaw, a man who'd tried too long to keep peace in a house built on quiet cruelty. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just looked up at her and said, "We'll talk later." She shrugged, turning back to her phone. "Whatever you say, Silas." I gathered the broken pieces, placed them gently back into my pocket, and walked down the hall. Maeve's door was half open. She was curled on her bed, face buried in her pillow, shoulders shaking. The pink nightlight beside her glowed faintly, the same one her mother used to read by. I stood there, unable to move for a while. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint drip from the kitchen faucet, the muffled sobs, all of it blurred into one sound. Loss. I whispered more to myself than her. "No more tears, kiddo." Then I closed the door quietly, the promise hanging in the air between us, soft but certain. The house had gone still. Only the whisper of rain against the windows reminded me the world was still moving. I stayed in the hallway for a while, listening to Maeve's soft, uneven breathing through the door. When I finally turned away, the floor creaked under my feet like it wanted to protest. Downstairs, the living room sat in half-darkness, the lamp in the corner flickering as thunder rolled somewhere far off. I sank into the couch, the broken music box resting on my palm. A thin gear still turned, trying to breathe life into a melody that no longer had a heart. I wound it once, gently. It clicked, stuttered, and fell silent again. Rochelle's voice from earlier wouldn't leave my mind. "She needs to learn her place." The words looped endlessly, sharper each time, mixing with the rhythm of raindrops hitting the window. I rubbed my temples, trying to drown it out, but something inside me had already shifted. The clock struck 10. Rochelle hadn't come downstairs. A soft glow spilled into the hallway from her study, the door slightly ajar. I hesitated, staring at that light for a long time. It was her space, a place I never entered. But tonight, something in my gut wouldn't let me rest. I stood, the wood floor cold under my bare feet, and walked toward the room. The air changed as soon as I stepped inside. Perfume and expensive wine. The faint hum of her laptop, the sound of rain, and the smell of deception blended together. Her desk was a mess, papers scattered, folders half open. I didn't mean to pry. I just wanted to understand what kind of person could look at a child crying and call it discipline. But then one envelope caught my eye. It was half hidden beneath a stack of receipts, but the name printed on it made my stomach tighten. Rochelle M. and Jason L. Jason. I froze. Jason was her so-called business partner, the one who called too often, whose voice always dropped when I answered instead of her. I picked up the envelope and unfolded the paper inside. A tuition receipt for a private academy across town, paid in full. The student's name wasn't Maeve's. It was Ethan L., Rochelle's son from her first marriage, paid using our joint account. I felt heat rise in my chest. I checked another folder, more invoices, small transfers, withdrawals from my business account. One document had my company's logo on it, stamped and signed, but the signature at the bottom wasn't mine. Before I could think, a low vibration broke the silence. Rochelle's phone lit up beside the keyboard. A new message blinked on the screen. "Can't wait to see you again. Don't worry, he'll never find out." For a second, I couldn't breathe. I just stared at it, every word like a nail driving deeper into my chest. Then instinct took over. I grabbed my phone, opened the camera, and started taking pictures. Each page, each receipt, every detail that could one day matter. My hands trembled, but not from fear. From clarity. When I finished, I placed everything exactly where it had been. The phone buzzed again. I turned the screen face down and stepped back just as the door behind me opened. Rochelle stood there in her silk robe, a lazy smile playing at the corner of her mouth. "Couldn't sleep?" I turned slowly, forcing calm into my voice. "No, just thinking about Maeve." She leaned against the doorframe, swirling her wine glass. "She'll toughen up. It's for her own good." "She's a child," I said quietly. "She's my child now," Rochelle replied, a trace of pride in her tone. "And you should thank me. I'm making her stronger." I looked her dead in the eye. "No," I said, my voice even. "You're making her afraid." Her smirk faltered just for a heartbeat, but she quickly regained it, stepping aside as if dismissing me from my own home. I brushed past her without another word. In the hallway, the rain had grown heavier, a steady drumming on the roof. I stopped outside Maeve's room again, listening. Her breathing was peaceful now, steady. I leaned my head against the door frame, exhaling slowly. The anger that had burned inside me cooled into something sharper. Cold. Deliberate. I took out my phone, opened my contacts, and scrolled until I found the name Lorraine. She lived next door, retired teacher, sharp as a knife. Months ago, she told me over coffee, "If you ever need help, call me." I still keep an eye on that side of the street. My thumbs hovered over the screen for a moment, then I typed, "You still have those cameras facing my kitchen window." I hit send. The little gray check mark turned blue. The rain kept falling. Upstairs, Rochelle's footsteps faded into her bedroom, and I sat in the dark hallway, waiting. Not for sleep, but for truth to finally show its face. By the time dawn touched the curtains, the rain had eased into a slow drizzle. The house smelled faintly of damp wood and last night's tension. Rochelle's side of the bed was already cold. She was gone. A note on the counter read, "Yoga. Back before lunch." Her handwriting was graceful, like she still believed she had control over everything. Maeve sat quietly at the breakfast table, her hair still messy from sleep. She picked at her toast, eyes distant. I poured her a glass of orange juice, trying to sound lighter than I felt. "You've got your spelling quiz today, right?" She nodded, but didn't look up. "Yeah." Her voice was soft, barely there. The silence between us wasn't new, but it was heavier now, like the house itself had learned to keep secrets. When it was time to leave, she grabbed her backpack and followed me to the car without a word. The drive to school was short, but every second stretched. She stared out the window, watching the trees flash by in streaks of green and gray. I wanted to say something, anything, to fix what Rochelle had broken, but I didn't know where to start. At the drop-off lane, she turned to me, trying to smile. "Bye, Daddy." Her voice trembled, but she forced the word Daddy like she didn't want to lose the habit. I smiled back, pretending not to notice how her fingers gripped the seatbelt a little too tightly. She waved once before stepping out. The backpack looked too big on her small shoulders. As she walked toward the entrance, I caught myself thinking how that tiny wave felt like goodbye. When I drove back home, the air inside the car still carried her scent, shampoo and crayons. Rochelle's SUV was gone, leaving the driveway empty. I sat there for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, the quiet pressing against my chest. I thought about what I'd seen in her study, what I'd photographed. Lies buried under neat signatures. Betrayal hiding in plain sight. And then I remembered Lorraine. She lived across the street in the pale yellow house with the porch full of wind chimes. The woman had known things long before anyone else did. She'd once been a reporter, the kind who could read a person's guilt before they spoke. I grabbed my jacket and crossed the road. The wind carried a chill, brushing against my face like a reminder that some things couldn't be ignored anymore. Lorraine opened the door before I even knocked. "You finally saw it, didn't you?" she said, her tone not surprised, just sad. I nodded. "Come in," she murmured. Her living room smelled of coffee and old books. On the table sat her laptop, screen already glowing. She motioned for me to sit as she clicked through folders. "I didn't want to meddle," she said quietly, "but when you started looking like a man walking through fog, I figured you needed light." The first clip played. Rochelle stood in the kitchen, her face twisted with anger, pointing a finger at Maeve. Even without sound, the fury was clear. The second clip, Maeve washing dishes at what looked like midnight, eyes half closed from exhaustion. The third, Rochelle threw something. It could have been a towel or a slipper. I couldn't tell. But the motion, the violence in it, made my jaw lock. I felt my chest tighten. My hand found the edge of the table, knuckles white. Lorraine placed her hand gently over mine. "You can use these," she said softly, "but use them wisely." I swallowed hard. "Thank you." She handed me a small flash drive. "Everything's on there. You'll know when the time's right." As I stood to leave, she added, "Don't lose yourself to anger, Silas. Plan before you move. People like her, they count on rage to make you reckless." Her words sank deep. Outside, the drizzle had turned into sunlight. I drove aimlessly for a while until I found myself at the small park near downtown. Children ran across the wet grass, their laughter echoing through the crisp air. A father pushed his son on a swing, both smiling like the world couldn't touch them. I sat on a bench, the flash drive heavy in my pocket. Watching them, I felt something twist inside me. Jealousy, guilt, longing. But beneath all of it, a new kind of resolve began to form. Rochelle's cruelty wasn't just about Maeve, it was about power. She wanted to erase every trace of the woman I'd loved before her, Maeve's mother, whose lullaby once filled our nights with peace. I pulled the cracked music box from my coat pocket, turned the key, and listened to the few broken notes that still played. They sputtered, stopped, then started again, just enough to remind me what mattered. "She's not taking any more of our joy," I whispered. The words weren't loud, but they carried weight. Back in the car, I opened my phone and stared at the screen for a long time. My reflection looked back. Tired eyes, a quiet fire behind them. Then I began typing an email. To Michael. Subject, custody inquiry. The cursor blinked, waiting. I took a deep breath and pressed send. The house was quiet when I pulled into the driveway that evening. Streetlights glowed against the wet pavement, and the faint hum of jazz floated through the front window. Rochelle's favorite trick, pretending peace. I stepped inside, setting my keys on the table. She was waiting on the couch, legs crossed, a glass of red wine balanced perfectly in her hand. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "You've been acting strange, Silas," she said, voice sweet but sharp. "Snooping around my things. What exactly are you looking for?" I kept my tone even, walking past her toward the shelf. "I was just cleaning up after Maeve's birthday." "Cleaning up?" She laughed softly, the kind of laugh that meant anything but amusement. "You mean spying?" I turned slowly, meeting her gaze. "If you have nothing to hide, why would it matter?" Her smile thinned. She set her glass down and stood, the click of her heels echoing through the living room. The music kept playing, Miles Davis low and steady, like the background to a lie. "You know what your problem is?" she said, stepping closer. "You let that little girl control you. You think she loves you, but she's just afraid you'll leave, like her real mother did." Her words landed hard, slicing through the calm I'd been clinging to. I didn't move, but something inside me cracked open. "Don't," I said quietly. She tilted her head. "Don't what?" "Don't use her pain as your weapon." She smirked, taking another step forward until I could smell the wine on her breath. "Then control your emotions," she whispered, "or I'll control what you lose next." For a heartbeat, the air between us froze. I saw it then, not just cruelty, but calculation. She wasn't angry, she was testing me, pushing to see how far she could go before I broke. I stepped back. "You should get some rest," I said flatly. Rochelle's eyes glittered. "Running away again, Silas?" I didn't answer. I just walked past her, feeling her gaze burn into my back. Behind me, she laughed softly, a deliberate, slow sound that filled the space like poison. In the hallway, I paused at Maeve's door. The light under it flickered faintly. When I opened it, she was curled on top of her bed, still in her clothes, backpack clutched against her chest. I knelt and gently slid it from her hands. Inside, folded between her homework and notebooks, was a piece of paper. A drawing. 3 stick figures. Me, Maeve, and Rochelle. But Rochelle's figure had a thick red X scrawled through it. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. I sat beside the bed, watching her sleep, her tiny fingers twitching against the pillow. There were dark circles under her eyes, shadows no child should wear. I brushed her hair from her face and whispered, "Daddy's here, sweetheart." She stirred slightly, but didn't wake. I folded the drawing and slipped it into my jacket pocket. It felt like a vow pressing against my heart. Hours passed. I couldn't bring myself to sleep. I sat in the kitchen instead, listening to the faint buzz of the refrigerator and the rhythmic ticking of the clock. Each sound seemed louder in the quiet. By the time the first streaks of dawn crept through the blinds, Rochelle was already moving about upstairs. I heard the shower, the hum of her hairdryer, the sound of heels against tile. She came down dressed in her crisp white blazer, the same one she wore when she wanted to look innocent. I poured her a cup of coffee, sliding it across the counter. "We'll talk tonight," I said evenly. She paused, studying me. "About what?" "About us. About Maeve." Her lips curved. "You make it sound so serious." "It is." She took the coffee, her expression unreadable. "Fine. Tonight, then." As she headed toward the door, she turned slightly, that practiced smile flashing again. You know, Silas, people who dig too deep often find things they can't handle. I didn't reply. She left, the door closing with a soft thud that somehow echoed. For a moment, I just stood there. The sunlight caught the edge of the countertop, turning the glass of her abandoned wine into a deep crimson shimmer. I pulled out the folded drawing, smoothing it out on the table. Maeve's red crayon lines stared back at me, honest, painful, and pure. My phone buzzed. An email notification flashed across the screen. From Michael, Family Law. Subject, Custody Inquiry. Urgent. I opened it. Come by tomorrow. I think you'll want to see what we found. The words sat there on the screen, glowing like the first spark before a storm. At sun, I stared at the screen for a long time before moving. The words from my lawyer's email glowed like they were alive, pulsing with something dangerous. Come by tomorrow. I think you'll want to see what we found. By morning, I was already on the road to downtown Charlotte. The sky hung low, heavy with clouds that hadn't decided if they wanted to rain again. The city looked washed out. Gray buildings, tired streets, the kind of morning that smelled like coffee and worn-out hope. Helene Ortiz's office sat on the 10th floor of a brick building near Trade Street. I'd known her for years, sharp, calm, unshakable. She'd helped me when my company went through its first big merger, back when Rochelle still pretended to believe in me. When I stepped inside, Helene looked up from her desk. "Silas," she said softly, "you said there was trouble. I didn't realize it was this bad." She gestured for me to sit, then slid a thick folder across the table. I didn't open it right away. I just watched her face. The way her jaw tightened told me enough. "She's been moving money," Helene said, her voice steady. "Small amounts at first, nothing alarming, but it's been almost a year now." I opened the folder. Inside were printed transaction logs, highlighted bank statements, and copies of company correspondence. Every line felt like a punch. Transfers labeled consulting fees, marketing expenses, vendor reimbursements. All to a single entity, RM Holdings. Helene continued, "It's a shell company, registered under her full name, Rochelle Marie Langston. The signature authorization on several transfers matches yours, but it's not you. It's forged." My hands trembled, not from surprise, but from the quiet fury crawling up my spine. Every piece of trust I'd given her now lay here, itemized in ink. Helene watched me carefully. "You could press charges," she said, "but that's not what you came for, is it?" "No," I said quietly. "Maeve comes first." Helene nodded, already expecting that answer. "Then we focus on custody. Financial abuse adds weight to your case. I'll handle the filings. For now, stay calm. Document everything." She reached into a drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope. "Keep this safe," she said. "It's not just paperwork. It's your lifeline." When I left her office, the city had brightened a little. The clouds still hovered, but sunlight broke through in thin, hopeful stripes. I sat in my car for a while, the envelope resting on the passenger seat, my reflection caught faintly in the glass. Rochelle's words from the night before replayed in my head. "Control your emotions, or I'll control what you lose next." She hadn't been bluffing. She'd been preparing. Every cruel word, every manipulation, it was all part of something bigger, something deliberate. I drove aimlessly for a while before pulling over at a park near the courthouse. Parents were out with their kids, tiny shoes kicking up mulch, laughter cutting through the air. One father knelt to tie his daughter's sneakers. She giggled and hugged him before running off again. It hit me harder than I expected. That easy, unguarded love, the kind that Rochelle had been slowly poisoning out of our home. I sat there until the sound of the playground faded behind me, then turned the key and headed home. By the time I arrived, the sun was dipping low, painting the windows with orange light. Rochelle's car was already in the driveway. Inside, she was humming to herself in the kitchen, setting plates on the table like everything was fine. "Hey," she said without turning around. "You're home early." "Yeah," I replied, loosening my tie. "How was your day?" "Oh, the usual," she said breezily. "By the way, the principal called. Maeve's teacher says she's been distracted lately." I leaned against the counter. "Maybe she's tired." Rochelle smirked, glancing over her shoulder. "Maybe she's reflecting your weakness." The words stung, but I didn't show it. I just smiled faintly. The kind that makes people wonder what you know. She poured herself a glass of wine, oblivious to the storm quietly brewing across the room. After dinner, I tucked Maeve into bed. She curled under the blanket, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Her eyes were already half closed when she whispered, "Daddy, Mommy says we might move away soon. Without you." The words froze me in place. I brushed her hair gently and whispered, "Go to sleep, sweetheart. Daddy's here." But my heart was pounding so loud I was sure she could hear it. When I stepped out of her room, I stood there in the hallway, staring into the dark, realizing what Rochelle's calmness really meant. She wasn't done. She was escalating. And then I was done waiting. I barely slept that night. The clock glowed 2:47 a.m. when I finally drifted off, but it couldn't have been more than an hour later when the sound of rolling wheels pulled me out of the fog. Luggage wheels, soft, deliberate, moving across the hardwood floor. I sat up. Through the half-open bedroom door, I saw Rochelle in a tailored navy suit, sunglasses perched on her head, though it was still dark outside. Her suitcase stood by the entryway. "Business trip," she said when she noticed me watching. Her tone was casual, almost cheerful. "3 days, don't wait up." Behind her, Maeve stood barefoot in her pajamas, clutching her stuffed bunny. Her little face was pale and wet. "Mommy said I can't come." I swung my legs out of bed and crouched beside her. "It's okay, sweetheart. You'll stay with me, all right? We'll have pancakes later." Rochelle's eyes flicked to me, cold, assessing. "Actually," she said smoothly, "I've made arrangements. She's coming with me. New environment, fresh air. It'll be good for her." Something inside me snapped, quiet but sharp. "You're not taking her." Her smile froze. "Don't make a scene, Silas. You'll regret it." Maeve's tears spilled. I lifted her gently into my arms and whispered, "Go pack a few things, just in case." She nodded, her little arms trembling around my neck before she ran down the hall. When I turned back, Rochelle had her phone to her ear, voice low and tight. "Yes, the tickets are confirmed. Just make sure the documents are ready when I land." She didn't see me standing there, memorizing the number on her screen, an international code I didn't recognize, the contact name just a single initial, M. The rumble of a car engine outside broke the silence. She ended the call, grabbed her suitcase, and strode toward the door. "Rochelle," I said evenly, "if you walk out that door with her, this won't end the way you think." She paused, only for a second. "You still don't get it," she whispered. "You never had control." Then she was gone. The door closed behind her with a sound that felt final. I stood there for a moment, the house suddenly too quiet. The air smelled faintly of her perfume and something else. Fear. I didn't waste time. I grabbed my jacket, my phone, and the folder Helene had given me the day before. 10 minutes later, I was on the road heading downtown. Helene met me at the office before business hours. She must have sensed the urgency in my voice when I called. Her hair was still damp, coffee in one hand, calm as ever. "Silas," she said, locking the door behind me, "tell me everything." I did. Every word, every strange call, the way Rochelle had tried to take Maeve. Helene's face hardened. "If she leaves the country with your daughter, it'll take months to get her back." She flipped through the custody folder, scanning the details. "We can file an emergency protective order right now. It'll prevent her from removing Maeve from the state." "Do it," I said without hesitation. She nodded, already dialing the clerk's office. Within hours, the paperwork was filed. The judge signed off before noon, a temporary hold granting me full custodial rights until the hearing. Maeve couldn't legally be taken across state lines. When I finally left Helene's office, the sky was bright but cold. I drove home in silence, every passing mile heavy with thought. Rochelle's business trip wasn't about work, it was escape, planned, polished, and precise. The house greeted me with a kind of eerie stillness. Half-eaten toast sat on the counter. The scent of her perfume lingered in the hallway. Her coffee mug was still warm. Every trace of her felt intentional, like she wanted me to know she'd almost gotten away. I checked the home security app on my phone. The camera feed flickered, then loaded. There she was, early morning footage from an hour before dawn, car trunk open, loading more than one suitcase. Not for 3 days, for good. I exhaled slowly, my hands gripping the counter until my knuckles ached. Maeve was in the living room, watching cartoons, her bunny tucked under her chin. When she looked up, she gave me a tired smile. Is Mommy gone? For now, I said. She nodded as if she'd already known the answer. Evening came heavy and slow. The house felt too big, too quiet. I sat by the window, watching the neighborhood lights flicker on one by one. Somewhere, a dog barked. Life went on, just not ours. I poured myself a glass of water, trying to calm the pulse behind my eyes. I'd spent years believing patience was strength, that silence was a shield. But now I saw it for what it was, a weapon Rochelle had used against me. I checked my phone again. No calls, no emails. Then, just as I was about to set it down, a message flashed from an unknown number. You think you've won? You don't know what I still have. I stared at the screen, the glow cutting through the dark room. In the corner, Maeve had fallen asleep on the couch, her bunny pressed against her chest. I stood there, listening to her soft breathing, and swore under my breath. Not in anger, but in promise. Because if Rochelle thought this was over, she hadn't seen what I was capable of yet. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. It started before sunrise, a relentless buzz that crawled under my skin. I grabbed it from the nightstand, half awake, and froze. Headline after headline filled the screen. Local businessman accused of domestic abuse. Sources claim father restrains child's mother. Each article used my name, my address. Even the photo of my house, taken from an angle that made the front porch look like a crime scene. Maeve was still asleep in her room, her stuffed bunny tucked beneath her arm. I stepped into the hallway and leaned against the wall, scrolling through the nightmare on my phone. Every word dripped with Rochelle's venom. I could almost hear her voice shaping each lie. She said he isolated her. She feared for her safety. She worried for the child. And there it was, the dagger, anonymous sources. There was no proof, no investigation. And just poison disguised as journalism. By the time I looked up, the morning light had begun to spill across the floor. My coffee sat untouched on the counter. I needed to move before the walls started closing in. I slipped out quietly, leaving Maeve with Lorraine next door. Keep her inside, I said softly. Lorraine nodded, concern etched across her face. The drive to the cafe near Helene's office felt longer than usual. Every stoplight gave me too much time to think. When I parked, I noticed two people at a nearby table glance at me, then whisper to each other. One of them raised her phone, pretending to scroll, but I knew what she was doing. That's him, I heard the woman murmur as I passed. Inside, the smell of burnt espresso and rain greeted me. Helene was already there, seated in the back corner, her laptop open and a stack of papers beside her. Her expression was tight. She's fast, she said the moment I sat down. But she made a mistake. She filed those accusations publicly before the custody case opened. That gives us leverage. I stared at the table, words refusing to form. My hands shook as I ran them over my face. She's trying to destroy me before the hearing, I said quietly. Helene's tone softened. She's trying to make you react. Don't give her that. The court sees through theatrics. We play the long game. So what do we do? Helene leaned back, arms crossed. Now, we stay silent. Let her dig her own grave. I'll file a response today, but we don't feed her fire. I nodded slowly. The advice made sense, but the weight of silence pressed down harder than any shouting match ever could. When I left the cafe, the world felt different. Even the air seemed heavier, charged with judgment. Every car that passed, every stranger's glance, it all carried the same quiet accusation. By evening, I was back home. Maeve was coloring at the kitchen table, humming to herself. She didn't know what the internet was saying. I prayed she never would. As the sun set, I tried to focus on the small sounds that still felt real, the scratch of her crayons, the hum of the fridge, the gentle tick of the clock. But then my phone buzzed again, a message from an unknown number. You can't hide behind that old woman lawyer forever. I stared at it for a long moment, the words twisting in my chest. Then, out of habit, my eyes drifted to the window. Across the street, Lorraine's porch light was still on. I grabbed my coat and crossed over. Lorraine opened the door before I could knock twice. You look like you've been hit by a truck, she said gently. Feels about right, I replied. She hesitated, then motioned me inside. I was going to wait, but maybe it's time. From the counter, she picked up a small box. The same kind camera equipment came in. She handed it to me. This is the rest of it. I didn't show you everything before. I frowned. What is it? Footage, she said, from the security cam outside my kitchen window. It caught part of that night you came over. Back home, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. The screen flickered, then opened a folder of video files. I clicked the first one. There was Rochelle, standing in our driveway, her voice raised, face twisted with rage. Another file showed her shoving open the car door, shouting something I couldn't make out. And then, the third clip. She was gripping Maeve's arm, hard. The little girl flinched, trying to pull away. The audio was faint, but clear enough. Maeve cried out, "Mommy, stop!" I froze. The air left my lungs. Lorraine's voice came from behind me, soft but steady. Now you decide how far you're willing to go. I leaned back in the chair, eyes still fixed on the screen. The faint reflection of Maeve's face from that moment felt like a wound reopening. If I release this, I whispered, she'll never see Maeve again. Lorraine met my eyes. And if you don't, she said quietly, she'll keep hurting her. The room went still. The screen kept playing, Rochelle's face flickering in the dim light like a ghost that refused to fade. I sat there, the hum of the laptop the only sound, knowing that whatever I chose next would decide everything. And so, with one slow breath, I clicked send. The video uploaded within minutes. I didn't expect what followed. By morning, sunlight cut through the blinds, and my phone was lighting up like a beacon. Dozens of notifications flashed across the screen. This time, they weren't from tabloids or angry strangers. They were from people I hadn't heard from in years. Friends, neighbors, even a few business partners. Man, I saw the footage. I'm so sorry. Can't believe what she did to you. Stay strong, Silas. We all know now. Then came the headlines. Truth behind Rochelle Weaver's accusations. Leaked footage tells a different story. Local mother under investigation after viral video shows disturbing moment with child. I scrolled in silence, heart pounding as the tide finally began to turn. Comment sections were flooded, so she lied about everything. That poor kid, she was terrified. This man doesn't deserve what she did to him. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was something heavier, like justice mixed with grief. My phone buzzed again. Helene's voice filled the line, sharp but calm. You did it, Silas. The court's moving fast now. Temporary custody hearing at 2 this afternoon. Get here early. I looked over at Maeve, still curled under her blanket on the couch, the morning light brushing across her hair. She stirred slightly when I whispered, "Come on, sweetheart. We've got somewhere important to go." We dressed quietly, ate toast in silence, and drove downtown. The courthouse steps were already lined with reporters, microphones raised, cameras flashing. The crowd hushed when they saw us. Maeve clutched my hand tighter. Then she appeared, Rochelle. She stepped out of a black sedan like it was a stage entrance. Hair perfect, suit flawless, a faint smile frozen on her lips. But the mask cracked when she saw who the cameras were aimed at now. The flashbulbs that once protected her now burned holes in her composure. Inside, the courtroom was packed. The hum of whispers died when the judge entered. I sat beside Helene. Across from us, Rochelle's lawyer adjusted his tie, visibly sweating. "Proceed," the judge said. Helene stood and calmly connected her laptop to the screen. The footage began to play. Rochelle's voice filled the room, shrill, angry, unmistakable. Then came the moment everyone waited for. Her hand clamping down on Maeve's arm, the child's voice breaking through the static. "Mommy, stop!" The sound cut through me like a blade. Around us, silence reigned. Even the judge's pen had stopped moving. Rochelle's face drained of color. Her lawyer scrambled. "Your Honor, this footage is taken completely out of context." The judge's tone was firm. "Context doesn't excuse cruelty." Helene slid another document across the table, the folder I'd once held like a lifeline. "Additionally, Your Honor, financial records show Mrs. Weaver rerouted marital funds through a shell company. Signatures appear forged. These are copies of the transfers." The judge leaned forward, her expression unreadable. Rochelle opened her mouth, but her voice cracked. "You had no right to dig into my accounts." I met her eyes for the first time that day. My voice came out steady. "You had no heart." A low murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge's gavel came down, sharp and final. Temporary custody is hereby awarded to Mr. Weaver. Further proceedings will determine permanent status. Court adjourned. The sound of the gavel echoed like thunder, but for the first time in months, I could breathe. Outside, cameras swarmed. Rochelle tried to shield her face, muttering to a reporter, "He ruined me! He's twisted everything!" Helene leaned close, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, she did that herself." I didn't stop for interviews. I just guided Maeve through the flashing lights, hand in hand, until we reached the car. The drive home was quiet, but peaceful. Maeve hummed softly in the back seat, drawing little hearts on the fogged window with her finger. The city, for once, looked calm, bathed in gold, like it was finally exhaling after holding its breath too long. When we pulled into the driveway, she asked, "Daddy, can we watch the sunset?" So we did. We sat on the porch, the sky melting from orange to pink to soft gray. She leaned her head on my shoulder, her tiny hand gripping mine. That night, as I tucked her into bed, she looked up at me with eyes too wise for her age. "Daddy," she whispered, "will Mommy ever love us again?" I swallowed hard, brushing her hair gently away from her face. "Maybe," I said, "but love isn't always what saves us." She nodded, half asleep, clutching her bunny. I turned off the light and stood in the doorway, watching her breathe, wondering if I'd done the right thing, or simply the only thing left. When I stepped out to the porch, the night air was still. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of silence. It felt like the house, the trees, even the stars had taken a deep breath with me, letting the chaos of the past weeks drift away. A week passed. The noise of reporters, the sharp edge of headlines, the whispers at the grocery store, all of it faded into something distant, almost unreal. What filled the space instead was softer. Maeve's laughter, the sound of the screen door creaking, the clatter of her crayons rolling off the table. I found myself on the porch again that morning, coffee in hand, watching her chase bubbles in the yard. For once there was no tension in her shoulders, no hesitation in her smile. Just lightness. That's when I noticed the envelope wedged under the front mat. My name, Silas, written in her handwriting. Rochelle's. I held it for a long moment, weighing it in my palm like it could burn me. Then I opened it. Inside was a single sheet folded once. The paper smelled faintly of her perfume, the same one that used to fill the house. "I lost everything trying to prove I mattered," it read. "I see now what I became. Tell Maeve I'm sorry." That was it. No excuses, no pleas. Just a confession written too late to change anything. I stood there quietly, reading it again and again until the ink seemed to blur. Then I folded the letter back along the crease, not to forgive, but to remember. That evening, Maeve and I stood side by side in the kitchen. The counters were dusted with flour, and the scent of vanilla filled the air. We were icing a small cake, nothing fancy, just a round one she insisted on decorating herself. She dipped her spoon into the frosting and smeared a glob right across her cheek. "You're terrible at this, Daddy," she giggled. "Yeah," I chuckled, pretending to frown. "But I'm trying." She grinned, and for a moment, everything was simple again. A knock came at the door. Lorraine stepped in, holding a small box of candles and that familiar, gentle smile. "Thought you might need a few of these," she said, setting them down. "Perfect timing," I told her. As she helped Maeve stick the candles into the cake, my phone buzzed. A text from Helene. "Final paperwork filed. It's over." I didn't reply. I just looked at Maeve, her cheeks pink, her eyes bright, and realized that over didn't mean finished. It meant peace was finally allowed to exist again. When the last candle was in place, Maeve looked up at me. "Can we light one for Mommy too?" The question hit softly, not painfully. I nodded. "Yes, sweetheart, for everyone who taught us how strong we can be." She smiled, satisfied, and blew out the candles one by one. The smoke curled upward, carrying something invisible with it. Grief, maybe, or grace. Later, after Lorraine said goodnight and Maeve brushed her teeth, I tucked her into bed. She fell asleep almost instantly, her bunny clutched close. I lingered there for a while, watching the steady rise and fall of her breathing. Then I stepped into the hallway where the quiet hummed like a friend instead of an enemy. On the small table by the door sat the music box. The same one that had shattered on the kitchen floor the day everything came apart. I'd taken it to be repaired last week. Now the craftsman's work gleamed faintly under the lamp. No cracks, no scars, just the faint scent of polished wood. I turned the key. The tune began softly, hesitant at first, then fuller, clearer, as if remembering itself. The same lullaby that used to fill our home before all the shouting. I carried it to Maeve's room and set it on her nightstand. The melody filled the dim light, steady and warm. "For every tear," I whispered, "there's something worth saving." I turned toward the doorway, pausing one last time. "I once thought protecting my daughter meant shielding her from pain," I murmured to the quiet room. "Now I know it means standing beside her, even when the world falls apart." The music box played on, its notes fading into the soft rhythm of her breathing. If you've ever fought for someone who couldn't fight back, I hope you never doubt this. Your silence isn't weakness. It's just waiting for the right moment to speak. Maeve stirred slightly, her voice barely audible in sleep. "It's okay, Daddy. She can't hurt us anymore." I exhaled, long and steady, then gently closed the door behind me. The lullaby carried on, faint but sure, like a promise finally kept.